Class 8, let's start today's class, and in today's class we'll revise chapter number 3, India in the 18th century, right? So in the previous video, in that class, we discussed about the decline of the Mughal Empire and the crisis of the empire and the later Mughals, and we also revised about the rise of independent states, and in that independent kingdoms or independent states, we talked about Hyderabad, Awadh and Bengal. So from today we are gonna start the Rajputs. Many Rajput rulers, like the rulers of Udaipur, Jaipur, Jodhpur, they had served under the Mughal emperors, right? And in exchange of that, they were permitted to enjoy the considerable autonomy. So autonomy is what? As a self-governing institution they got, right? For their in their Watan Jagirs, right? In the 18th century, these rulers tried to extend their control over adjacent regions also. So not only that, they had got autonomous power of that region, and as well as slowly what they started doing, they started controlling over their adjacent nearby regions, right? And many of them were involved in factional politics of the Mughal court also. So these influential Rajput families claimed the Subedari of the rich provinces of Gujarat and Malwa. Similarly, Raja Ajit Singh of Jodhpur held the governorship of Gujarat, as well as Sawai Raja Jai Singh of Amber was governor of Malwa, right? So he got the governorship of that Malwa. Now these officials were renewed by Emperor Jahandar Shah in 1713. So they also tried to extend their territories by seizing portions of imperial territories neighboring their Watan. So not only that, they also extended their territories, right? Extended their territories, as well as Nagar was conquered and annexed to the house of Jodhpur. So they conquered, means in that process, or in that process, they attacked the Nagar, and they captured Nagar, and they annexed to the house of that Nagar, to the house of Jodhpur, right? And while Amber seized large portions of Bundi. Not only that, Sawai Raja Jai Singh founded his new capital at Jaipur and was given the Subedari of Agra in 1722. So Maratha campaigns into Rajasthan from the 1740s put severe pressure on their principalities and checked their further expansion. So in this way, the Rajputs, they got the governorship of that provinces, or a particular province, or they have got the Subedari of the province, and later on what they did, they had full control over that province, as well as not only that, they had started controlling their neighboring states, and they added those neighboring states to their watans, or to their territory, right? Okay, now next is the Sikh. The organization of the Sikhs into the political community during the 17th century helped in regional state building in the Punjab. Several battles were fought by Guru Gobind Singh against the Rajput and Mughal rulers, both before and after the institution of Khalsa in 1699. So Khalsa is an institution which was founded in 1699. 1699. So before that, Khalsa, or before 1699 and after 1699, Guru Gobind Singh fought a series of battles with the Rajput as well as the Mughal rulers, right? The development in Punjab was different from other regions. Zakaria Khan, the governor of Lahore, had tried to establish an independent political system in Punjab. So underline, this is important. The name Zakaria Khan, the governor of Lahore, had tried to establish an independent political system, had tried to control over Punjab, right? But he failed mainly because of the struggle of the Sikh for independent political authority. And he tried to, Zakaria Khan tried to seize, tried to control Punjab, but that was failed due to continuous struggle of Sikh community, right? So, after the death of Guru Gobind Singh in 1708, the Khalsa rose in revolt against the Mughal authority under Banda Bahadur's leaderships. So after the death of Guru Gobind Singh, that revolt was led by Banda Bahadur, right? And under his leadership, he declared the sovereignty ruled by striking coins in the name of Guru Nanak Dev and Guru Gobind Singh, and established their own administration between the Satluj and the Yamuna. Banda Bahadur was arrested in 1715 and executed, and he was killed in 1716, right? So after the struggle of Guru Gobind Singh, Banda Bahadur led that revolt, and he was arrested in 1715 and he was killed. He was executed in 1716. The Sikh organized themselves into numerous small and highly mobile Jat. It's a group of Sikh people, we call it Jat, and pose serious challenge to the Mughal imperial authority, and they continuously fought against the Mughal rulers, right? So the foreign invasion, Persian and Afghan, the Mantha incursion, and internal rivalry. Internal rivalry means internal conflicts in the provincial administrations created a very fluid situation in Punjab, which helped the Sikh to consolidate their base. In the second half of the 18th century, the different Sikhs have regrouped themselves into 12 larger regional confederacies or missals. So missals is what? It's a unit of Sikh brigade or Sikh warriors. So in the second half of the 18th century, what they did, they reorganized or they regrouped into 12 larger regional missals or group brigade, right, under the leadership of various local chieftains. The process towards the establishment of an autonomous state became complete only under Ranjit Singh at the beginning of the 19th century. So finally they got an autonomous state, autonomous province under the leadership of Ranjit Singh at the beginning of 19th century. So this was the struggle of Sikh against the Mughal rulers, and finally they got an autonomous state, right? And that became complete only under Ranjit Singh at the beginning of the 19th century, right? Okay, now next is struggle of Mysore. So after the fall of Vijayanagar Empire, the Mysore came into existence as a powerful and independent state, right? So later on, it accepted nominal overlordship of the Mughals. Later on, it was ruled by the Mughals, Mysore, but it took advantage of the defeat of the Mughals at the hands of Nadir Shah and asserted its independence. So they lost this Mysore at the hands of Nadir Shah, right? Mysore had grown in strength under the leadership of powerful rulers. So here comes the powerful name of the powerful rulers, Hyder Ali and Tipu Sultan, his son Tipu Sultan. Hyder Ali and his son Tipu Sultan. So Hyder Ali, he ruled this Mysore from 1761 to 1782, and his son, this Tipu Sultan, he ruled from 1782 to 1799. But in 1767, Mysore confronted with the East India Company, that means Britishers, and finally they lost their territory, or they lost their province, that is Mysore, right? But Mysore had grown in strength, and Mysore had reached to its height under the leadership of Hyder Ali and his son Tipu Sultan, right? Okay, now next, why did the East India Company, that means Britishers, confront with Mysore? Confront means why they fought with Mysore. Now here are the reasons. Mysore controlled the profitable trade of the Malabar coast, where the company purchased pepper and cardamom. So Mysore was very popular, or the Mysore pepper and the cardamom was very famous, and it was a trading center, right? Mysore was a trading center, and Mysore has got profitable trade. That is why East India Company, they confronted with Mysore. Secondly, in 1785, Tipu Sultan stopped the export of sandalwood, paper and cardamom through the ports of his kingdom and disallowed local merchants from trading with the company. So second reason is Tipu Sultan stopped doing export of with the East India Company, with the Britishers, right? So he stopped what? He stopped exporting of goods like paper, cardamom and sandalwood, right? So this was also one of the causes that for the East India Company, for confronting East India Company with Mysore. Next is Tipu Sultan had also established a close relationship with the French in India and modernized his army with their help. So in one hand, Tipu Sultan was in very friendly relation with the French, but in the other hand, he was not allowing that Britishers to trade with them, right? So, and he also modernized his army with the French, with the help of French. He modernized his army in Western type and with the help of the French. The company saw Hyder and Tipu Sultan as ambitious, arrogant and dangerous rulers who had to be controlled and crushed. So East India Company, they saw these two, Tipu Sultan and Hyder Ali, a very ambitious and great rulers. So what they thought that these rulers had to be crushed and they had to be controlled. Otherwise, they would not allow, or they would be in difficulty. The Britishers will be in difficulty, right? 4 wars were fought with Mysore. Here are the dates: 1767 to 69, 1780 to 84, 1790 to 92, and 1799. So these are the series of those 4 wars which were fought between Mysore and the East India Company. At last, in the Battle of Srirangapatnam, the company ultimately got a victory. Tipu Sultan was killed defending his capital Srirangapatnam. Mysore was placed under the former ruling dynasty of as a subsidiary alliance was imposed on the state. So subsidiary alliance means now the states which were under the control of Britishers, they would not make any treaty or alliance. They would not make any treaty or alliance with the others, right? So any Indian ruler who entered into the subsidiary alliance with the English would not give, would give money or some territories for the maintenance of the British contingent in their territory. And the rulers would neither enter in any alliance with any other power, nor would they declare war without the permission of the East India Company, right? So these were according to the subsidiary alliance. And the subsidiary alliance was imposed on that state. So on that state means on Mysore. Now next is the Marathas. So the Marathas had long lived in the region around Satara in the western portion of Deccan Plateau. So Deccan Plateau means it's South India. So they were courageous and fearless warriors. In the 17th century, the Marathas found a new leader in the form of Shivaji, the son of the general Shahaji Bhosle, who had been active in Ahmednagar between 1633 to 1636, leading the battle against the Mughals from around 1658. Shivaji was able to free the Marathas from the Muslim sultans of Bijapur to the southeast and carve out an independent Maratha zone around Pune, incorporating the Bijapur and Golconda Sultanate and some Mughal areas. After a lifetime of exploits and guerrilla warfare against the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb, Shivaji died in 1680. Leaving a Maratha kingdom of great extent but strategically and vulnerably located. So, when we talk about the Marathas, so in Marathas, this name Shivaji was very, very famous because he was very powerful and very courageous and fearless warrior, right? So, and it was told that Shivaji was very much he knew about the guerrilla warfare. So what was guerrilla warfare? So guerrilla warfare is what? It is a form of irregular warfare in which a small group of military military personnel or a small group of armed forces, they use military tactics, and military tactics like hit and run tactics, or we can say includes ambushes as well as raids, right? So he was very clever, and he was very much he had that tactics, right? Guerrilla warfare. So this Shivaji, he was died in 1680 after a lifetime of exploits and guerrilla warfare against the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. He was died in 1680, leaving a Maratha kingdom of great extent. So that Maratha was a large province, right? So he left that large province behind, but strategically and vulnerably located. After Shivaji's death, effective powerful in the Maratha state was wielded by a family of Chitpavan Brahmanas who served Shivaji's successors as Peshwa. So Peshwa means principal minister. Pune became the capital of Marathas. After that, developed a very successful military organization comprising of cavalry, infantry and artillery. So infantry means it's a soldiers who walk on foot, right? And artillery means it's a heavy military weapon, like firearms we can say, right? So it's a heavy military weapons, firearms. So that's a artillery. And cavalry means the soldiers who ride on a horseback. So this the Marathas developed a very successful in military organization comprising of these cavalry, infantry and artillery, right? So their success lay in bypassing the fortified areas of the Mughals by raiding cities and by engaging Mughal armies in areas where their supply lines and reinforcement could be easily disturbed. So the Marathas empire expanded rapidly between 1720 to 1761 by chipping away important regions of the Mughal empire. Malwa and Gujarat were seized from Mughals by the 1720s, and by the 1730s the Maratha empire expanded almost in whole of the Deccan. So Deccan means south, whole South India. Marathas used to levy. There were two types of taxes they used to take. One is Chauth and the second one is Swadesh Mukhi. Right. So now what is Chauth? Chauth was the 1/4 of the total produce, whereas Swadesh Mukhi was 1/10 of the total produce. Right. So after raiding Delhi in 1737, the frontiers of Maratha dominations expanded rapidly into Rajasthan and Punjab in the north, into the Bengal and Odisha in the east, and into the Karnataka and Tamil and Telugu countries in the south. These were not directly included in the Maratha Empire, but were made to pay tribute as a way of accepting Maratha sovereignty. So they were not directly included in Maratha, but these provinces need to pay tribute as a way of accepting Maratha sovereignty, right? So maybe that they had to pay tribute means in form of gifts or in form of cash, right? Or produce. So expansion brought enormous resources, but it came at a price. Expansion means for Maratha it came it brought enormous resources, right? But it had bad side also. These military campaigns also made other rulers hostile towards the Marathas. As a result, they were not inclined to support the Marathas during the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761. So this was the bad side, that as the result that they were not inclined towards, that means they were not supporting Marathas in the war during the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761, right? Alongside endless military campaigns, the Marathas developed an effective administrative system as well. Once conquest was being completed and Maratha rule was secure, revenue demands were gradually introduced, taking local conditions into account. Agriculture was encouraged and trade revived. Trade revived means trade was again reintroduced and agriculture was encouraged. This allowed Maratha chief Sardars like Scindia of Gwalior and Gaikwad of Baroda and Bhosle of Nagpur the resources to raise powerful armies. So reviving of trade, reviving of business, reviving of export and import, and encouraging agriculture. That means this allowed Maratha chief Sardars like names are given here: Sindhia of Gwalior, Gaikwad of Baroda, and Bhosle of Nagpur, the resources to raise powerful armies, so that they plentifully they can use this amount on their armies to raise and to make them to raise them into the powerful armies, right? Okay, now look at this map here. You just see this yellow patch. This is the map of India, and this is the how Maratha and the British territory had control over the territories or territories of India. So this purple patch is the extension of British territory, right? Extension of, we can say, the East India Company. And just see this yellow patch, that shows the extension of Maratha territory, right? Almost this South India, as well as it had extended to north also, this Maratha territory, right? Okay. So this is how the different independent states grew up after the later Mughals, and the life was not very long. After that, seeing the political condition of India, seeing the conditions of different independent states, different independent emperors, Britishers, they took advantage of the situation and they started controlling over India, right? And they slowly started annexing the Indian territories one after another, and finally they had full control over India, right? Okay, children, in civics, in chapter number 2, 1B, we have missed one topic, so that is collective responsibility, collective and individual responsibility. So let's talk about that. So collective responsibility of the Council of Ministers. So when we say collective responsibility, means it's a team work. So the ministers, the Council of Ministers, they work as a team. So it is also said that they swim and sink together, right? Just keep in mind this sentence, that they work as a team and they swim and sink together. So collectively they are responsible to Lok Sabha, right? Now the Indian Constitution ensures that the Council of Ministers is collectively responsible to the Parliament, right? To the Parliament, to the Lok Sabha. And this means that under the leadership of the Prime Minister, all the ministers jointly share the responsibility for the policies and performance of the government. If a no confidence motion is passed by the Parliament against the government or any individual member of the Council of Ministers, then the whole Council of Ministers has to resign, that is en bloc. So here if no confidence motion is charged against a minister, that means a minister means a minister of Council of Ministers. If no confidence motion is charged against a minister, and that has been it has been proved, right? So in that case whole the Council of Ministers along with that minister has to resign, right? So if if a no confidence motion against the government or any of the minister is charged and that no confidence motion is approved, right, in the parliament. So in that condition, the prime minister or the, if we are talking about state, the chief minister along with his whole council of ministers has to resign. And if we talk about the cabinet, the prime minister, if the no confidence motion is charged against a minister, against the prime minister, so the prime minister has to resign. So resignation of prime minister means resignation of whole ministers, council of ministers. So that we called it collective responsibility. Whole council of ministers, collectively they are responsible to the parliament. Clear? Okay now. And that is, then the whole council of ministers has to resign. That means we call it a term en bloc, E-N-B-L-O-C-K, en bloc. Thus the council of ministers in a state swims and sink together. Now the principle of individual responsibility also implies that each member is responsible to the council of ministers for lapses or for the failure of his department. So this we are talking about individual, one minister. So here no collective responsibility, right? So if such thing happens, then the concerned minister has to resign or he is dropped from the council of ministers by the prime minister. In that case, the entire council of ministers does not have to resign. So when we talk about individual minister, that means no confidence motion is charged against one individual minister. So in that case, and if it is, so if no confidence motion is charged against one particular minister, that means that minister has to resign from his post. Right? So that is individual responsibility. Clear? Okay. So that's all for the day, children. I hope you have got the half-yearly syllabus. Just do well and all the best for your exams. Thank you.